Hello to everyone and the internet. It is currently Thursday, January 10th. I am Nathan of Washington and you are watching The Young Globalist. This is the news. Alright. So, Viktor Orban calls for anti-immigrant forces to take power in the EU. I will now read you an article concerning this. He is the Prime Minister of Hungary. He called for anti-immigration forces to seize power in the European elections in May and said he would fight French President Emmanuel Macron, who he says was leading a pro-immigration agenda. Ain't that the truth? The Hungarian Prime Minister also hailed the new partnership forged with Poland by Italy's Matteo Salvini, who challenged the French-German access on Wednesday during a visit to Warsaw. The Mail Online reports Orban called Salvini his hero after the Italian leader said there would be a new plan for Europe. At talks with Jarosław Kaczynski, the head of Poland's governing right-wing Law and Justice (PiS) party. Orban said Salvini's stance was brave. He was the first politician in Europe who said that migration can also be stopped at sea. That made him a hero in my eyes, the 55-year-old Hungarian leader said. Orban, who won a third consecutive term in April with an electoral campaign based on anti-immigration policies, also said that he had great hopes for cooperation between Italy and Poland. He gave full support to an Italian-Polish initiative to form a right-wing alliance with the European Parliament where he hopes anti-immigration parties will gain a majority. The Polish and Italian ruling nationalist parties currently sit in different European Parliament groupings to Orban's Fidesz, which is a member of the centre-right European People's Party. Orban said he sees that anti-immigration forces capable of governing are searching for different modes of cooperation, and that is good news for both us and the EPP. Fidesz's presence in the EPP has been controversial, with critics calling for it to be expelled from the grouping over what they say is Orban's growing authoritarianism. Last September, the European Parliament voted to launch unprecedented legal action against Budapest over alleged breaches of democratic values. Orban said that for the first time, the European elections will decide on a question that touches all of Europe. That is immigration. Does immigration touch Europe down there? Sometimes I really am just like a 12-year-old boy. Orban took aim at Macron, whom he called the leader of pro-immigration policies in Europe. It is nothing personal but a matter of our country's future, Orban said of Macron. If what he wants with regards to migration materializes in Europe, that would be bad for Hungary, therefore I must fight him. Orban also said he saw no chance for a compromise with Germany. He said German politicians and media attack him often brutally, exerting undue pressure on him to admit migrants. Immigration has been the main political vehicle for Orban since 2015, when he was the first leader on the continent to take an extreme hardline on the issue. He built a razor-wire fence along Hungary's southern border to stop it as tens of thousands of refugees fleeing war and poverty reached Europe's shores and border. Orban has tightened his grip on power since 2010, defying EU norms and rising to prominence as the continent's voters increasingly respond to populist agendas. While Orban made strides in fixing the economy, his critics have said he has done that while eroding democratic checks and balances, turning much of domestic media into mouthpieces and using EU funds to bolster businessmen friendly to his regime. Orban's stance set up to the prospect of a southern and eastern European axis against a France-German tandem ahead of the EU elections, which could redraw the continent's political map. Salvini said during a visit to Warsaw on Wednesday that Italy and Poland should join forces in a Eurosceptic alliance. The Polish-Italian or Warsaw-Rome alliance is one of the greatest developments this year could have started, with Orban said, describing Salvini as a hero for stopping migration at the shores of Italy. I am pinning great hopes on this. Hungary's goal is to gain an anti-immigrant majority in the European Parliament, then in the Executive European Commission, and later as national elections change the continent's political landscape, the European Council, where national leaders make the important EU decisions, Orban said. Right, so in short, there are quite a few anti-immigrant politicians among the EU, and Viktor Orban wants them to take control. I would agree that would be a solid, respectable goal. Because I understand the reason why these migrants want to go to Europe. Their home countries are fucked up. They've been destroyed by war. Some of them are economic migrants, and they're not actually fleeing from anything. The ones coming from Africa are your economic migrants. The ones coming from the Middle East are actually fleeing from war and devastation. Although, for whatever reason, they bring their culture with them when they go, rather than assimilating. If they're gonna stay, then they should become a true citizen of that country, and they should assimilate. That's how it should be, damn it. Alas, but no. They're globalists. They want multiculturalism very badly. And this, we, the United States, who caused this war and devastation, have created the greatest opportunity. Which is why the Middle Eastern wars and proxy wars need to stop. Altogether. Completely dead in their tracks. But I side with Viktor, or if I were a European, that is, I'm already European in the sense that I'm white. What I mean is, if I was nationally European, I would be on Viktor Orban's side. But since I'm an American, well, even as an American, I'm on Viktor Orban's side. Because that creates a precedent for America to take the same stance. It shows that it's okay. Because it's actually going to benefit Europe to keep out these migrants who are overrunning their populations, and in some cases causing a lot of rape and violence and murder, etc., and also hurting their economies. It's an example of what not to do. In short. So I'm all for politicians like Viktor Orban, who are against globalism, obviously, and multiculturalism and the multiculturalist agenda. Moving on, a series of Democratic ads got real sneaky and tried to get conservatives to vote Democrat. And how they did it was actually extremely clever. I almost feel like complimenting for them on this, just how clever it was. It actually made me take pause for a second when I read about it. But the ads tried to convince conservatives that the Republican Party had betrayed them. And in some cases that is true. It's what I would call an exaggerated truth. And any great lie that actually works will have a little bit of the truth wrapped up in it somewhere. Like how Emperor Palpatine twisted up Anakin in the prequel trilogies about the Jedi and turned him against the Jedi. He wrapped up the truth in a blanket of lies. That's how you do that. That's how you manipulate somebody. You take the truth, exaggerate it to all hell, and wrap it up in a big ball of lies. And that's precisely what they did here. They lied about being conservatives themselves, the people on the ad sites connected to Facebook. These ads were found through ad archives. But in fact, the leader of this ad campaign was, in fact, found to be a former member of the Obama administration, Mikey Dickerson, a Democrat. They were trying to get conservatives to either vote Democrat or not at all. This is where we're at now. Politicians are like diapers. Both should be changed regularly, but both for the same reason. And the Democratic Party is the filthiest diaper of all. But don't be fooled, because the Republican Party is just as filthy. It's just a lot less obvious. It's poop that don't stink, as it were. I have to wonder what would happen if we just all started voting for third-party candidates. Because I trust the Libertarians and even the Greens more than either of the DNC or RNC parties. Mind you, I can't say I truly call myself a Libertarian anymore, but I strongly lean in that small government direction. With a small government presence in the marketplace, mostly to break up monopolies and to enforce the rules of competition. Because if capitalism is supposed to be about creating competition, well, in every boxing match there has to be a referee, right? To enforce the rules of that competition. And to be perfectly honest, the government is not doing that. It should be, but it's not. And who would the referee answer to when he's not obeying his own rules? The people. The people will be the boxing commission, so to speak. They'll answer to us. Democracy makes that possible. But bottom line is, this just shows how dirty modern politics really are. And in particular, left-wing politics and the Democrats are the dirtiest politicians that I can honestly conceive of at this point. It's kind of sickening, to be honest. Moving on. Clinton and Cuomo now push bill to legalize abortion up to birth in the state of New York. So, in short, until you pop out of the vag, you're free game. They can kill you anytime. What a time to be a fetus. What a time to be a baby. What a time to be a man. In some cases. Bottom line is, progressivism once upon a time was a good thing. But it just... around maybe 2008, 2009, it just kind of went to a very dark place. And that's how we got the SJWs and dirty leftist politicians and shit. Well, I suppose they were always dirty to some degree, but I mean, what's going on right now has pretty much been going on since the start of the decade. And it's looked like it's going to match the closing of the decade as well. It's just never going to end. That one seems like. I've already told you I've seen footage that proves that late-term abortion is murder, that these are living babies. But they're trying to push this bill so that it'll go into effect should the Supreme Court ever overturn Roe v. Wade. And you know what? You know, they're so upset about the idea because they're Republicans. Personally, I don't think there should be any abortion. Like, I'm all for supporting freedoms. You have the freedom to choose up until you get pregnant. This is about the mother's rights. Yeah, the mother's right to murder her infant, her unborn baby. We've proven, it can be proven, it is a living thing. Therefore, you are committing murder. Good day, sir. This is the most grievous sin in relation to abortion, and it cannot be allowed. I am urging all New Yorkers to vote against this garbage bill. And for that matter, to just stop voting for Democrats, and so they'll lose power. Ladies, keep your babies. I'm going to show you a video now of Barack Obama, well, you're going to hear it, having originally been against illegal immigration, and show you that he is an absolute flip-flopper.
The immigration debate towards the sensible center. Obviously, he tells one of the more powerful stories of immigration of anybody in the Senate, and to be able to work with him is a great honor. Both of us come to this debate with a special appreciation for the immigrant story in this country. Senator Martinez's own life story is a moving example of why an open so damaging is that it ends up creating a pool of workers with depressed wages and no rights, and that's not something that we find acceptable. American employers also need to take responsibility. Too often illegal immigrants are lured here on the promise of a job, only to receive unconscionably low wages. In the interest of cheap labor, unscrupulous employers look the other way when employees present fraudulent U.S. citizenship documentation. These acts hurt both American workers and immigrants whose sole aim is to work hard and get ahead. And that's why we need a simple, foolproof, and mandatory mechanism for all employers to check the legal status of new hires. And let me repeat, we need strong border security at the borders, but we also need a virtual border that is created by employers having to check to see if these people genuinely are legally in this country and should be working. Finally, and this is the third principle that I think is most important, if we hope to bring the 11 million existing undocumented workers out of the shadows into the open, we have to give them a reason. I am sympathetic and I understand people's frustrations with respect to those who have come here illegally. But we have to understand that they are now here, they are paying taxes, they are raising families, many of their children are U.S. citizens who are born here and are going to school here. And if we are going, not going to happen. Some of the proposed ideas in the House that's being debated today and tomorrow call for only increased enforcement at the borders and at the workplace. If the policy we end up with tells these immigrants that they will never be good enough to become Americans, then the policy will not work. Part of ending illegal immigration will have to be reforming legal immigration to better reflect our demands for immigrant workers.
So, in short, we see that Obama was a flip-flopper. He just went back on what he'd already said. The Democrats don't want to admit it, but before Trump went into office, they were very much anti-illegal immigration. They very much were. What changed? It's easy. Illegal immigrants coming into the country started voting left and gave them power. Started giving them votes. That's what changed. That's what happened. That's why they flip-flopped. In short, they're dirty as hell. Obama's a flip-flopper. Trump stays the course. And for our final story today, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. I like saying it that way. It's fun. Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez makes a claim without evidence, by the way, that Trump is a racist. A go-to allegation of the left, surprise, surprise. And that immigrants seeking asylum waiting at the border are acting more American than Trump supporters. Well, yes, the ones who are there and behaving, they are acting very remarkably, almost like model citizens. I will agree with that much. But more so than Trump supporters? Do you know all the Trump supporters? Have you seen how they've been acting? Like literally every last one of us? Because if not, then you really can't make that claim. No more than you can make the claim that that Trump is a racist without evidence. She's being incredibly hyperbolic with these statements. So it's pure hyperbole. I have no confidence in Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. I don't know if we have this function in the United States, but in many democracies there is something called a vote of no confidence, where you've lost all faith in a given politician and you can vote, nope, we don't think you're good enough to get the job done. Be gone with you. I think that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez should suffer a vote of no confidence. I, for one, would vote for that, for sure. I would say no confidence in her as a congressperson. I want her out of there. I don't think she's competent enough. I mean, she's hyperbolic. In some cases, she's a flat-out liar. She's got a certain childlike naivete. She doesn't understand taxation. She doesn't know what the hell she's doing. I don't see anything good coming out of her tenure in Congress at all. Absolutely nothing good. I am literally preparing myself for the worst. I'll be surprised if the best happens, and I'll be happy if it does, but I'm preparing myself for the worst, just in case. It seems like a likely enough scenario. Bottom line, though, is she's literally a bullshitter. Personally, I think the migrants should go back home and fight for their country. Fight to try and make it a better place. That's what they should be doing. Maybe ask America for help instead of, jumping our border and shit. Anyway, that's it for the Unglobalist today, folks. I'm out.